Eat like a king who's on a budget. 3 tasty options, fries, drink, and nuggets. All for $5. Wait, that can't be right. Just confirm that that's the real price. BK, have it your way.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Week 17 is in the books. I'm here, Alan Casanova Castro, holding it down for you guys. You may notice that it's just me again. We keep doing this flip, flop, where it's me hosting, it's Slaps hosting, now it's me hosting again. But I'm happy to be doing this. I want to wish you all a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to everybody that may be tuning in to this episode. Like I said, I'm Alan Casanova Castro. Slaps is moving, so he is unable to be with us on this episode. And Scotty is still learning how to be a dad. I think he's figured it out. I saw some pictures. Baby seems to still be alive, so I think he's doing really well. So again, congrats to Scotty. He's still not here, and Slaps is moving to a new home, which I think, kind of let you guys in on some of the background of where this podcast is heading to. Is we're really hoping to go live in one space and be with each other in a room and banter and do all that fun stuff. I think the streaming thing, in my opinion, just kind of, it's everybody's streaming, everybody's doing it. So look for some changes coming up into, next season as we kind of get into newer episodes. You may see us tinkering in the off season with some new formats, but I'm happy to be here with you. We had a lot happen in week 17, and it's week 17. It means we got 1 week left. Only one. I don't know where the season's gone. But I don't know. We're almost done. So we got week 17 highlights. The Broncos win the West, the Patriots win the East, just like we all predicted. And the New York Giants won this week and then somehow still lost this week? ? So we'll unpack all of that on this episode of Leather Brains. Just a wild week. I'm just sad that we only have one more week. There's only one more full slate of football left. Then we get into the playoffs, and then it just kind of like whizzes right on by, and then that's it. Kind of wild. Honestly, this season seemed to go by super fast. If you think of all the way back to week 1, that Ravens-Bills game, and then you fast forward to this point in time, you're like, damn, time just cruises. The world's going crazy, but the NFL season just keeps on cruising. So we're going to dive into all of that on this episode. I got a lot of comments rolling in on YouTube or on Instagram. We'll get into it. So let's kick things off. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? We got a lot of games to get through. Not all of these have actual implications on anything in life. They just kind of happened. And so we'll talk about all those games. But there's actual games that had some implications on the playoff picture. So what we'll do is we'll hammer through all these games. We'll kind of discuss. Please feel free to comment, chime in. You have thoughts, you have opinions. Love to hear it. I'll show them live on the screen. If you you got something to say about any of these games, you think I'm crazy, you're probably right, but I'd love to hear about it. So we'll jump into these. And then at the end of this episode, we'll just kind of quick talk about what the playoff picture looks like going into week 18. The field's kind of set as far as who's going to be playing, but the seeding still is up for a little bit of clarity. So we'll dive into that. So let's get into it. Cowboys beat the Commanders 30-23. Now these are your Thursday games. So these were your Christmas games. So if you woke up, your opening presents, I don't know if the first thing you wanted to see was Dak Prescott on your screen, but that's what you got. Cowboys win again, 30-23. Dak had himself a game. This game was much closer than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. I'm still really impressed with the Commanders' rushing offense, even with the lack of, quarterback. I think Mariota's banged up again. And, obviously we know about Jaden Daniels being banged up this year, but the Commanders, they can run the ball and they can play defense. They're aging. This game didn't really have any bearing on the playoff picture. The playoffs were kind of, like I said, we're kind of set. But Dak had himself, day, threw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both of these teams are eliminated. So, this was we call these paycheck games. You're just kind of collecting a paycheck. There's not really much to play for either side of these. But Commanders obviously skidding. They're can probably end the season about 4-13. Quite opposite of what I think a lot of people thought the Commanders were going to do going into this year. But age and injuries, I mean, that's going to kill you. And then for the Cowboys, you think of all the wasted opportunities they had this season, and even during this game, you had times where this offense looked like you wanted it to look, and then there's times you're like, I'm not sure what I'm getting into. Malik Davis had himself a day, over 100 yards rushing, no touchdowns. But Dallas has weapons. I think that's the thing that still is puzzling to me, is that they have weapons. They have the ability to take the top off of a defense, but just unable to put it together. So this happened. It's going to be one of those things you're going to hear in this episode. Like, they played football, but I'm not sure too many people were paying attention unless you're a fan of one of these teams. Or, on Christmas, there's not much else other than a Christmas Story on. So you got Christmas Story, you got the Cowboys Commanders. And so that's what we got on. That's what we got on this for this game. Like I said, season's over. Dak had a good week. He was sacked a lot. I don't know, just kind of like a nothing. We're going to get into the game that actually had a little something, because I want to talk about this one. Vikings eliminated the Lions 23-10 on Christmas. Not the gift that, I think Dan Campbell thought he was going to be receiving from this team. I just don't, the easy, I think the low hanging fruit on this one, and shout out to the Vikings, still playing hard. For this Lions team to show up this way at the end of the season, middle of the season, I don't know what was there. I think the low hanging fruit is Ben Johnson is no longer around. I think the questions that a lot of people are going to be asking when we go into the offseason, when we talk about what changes teams have to make, when you look back, on the season that was for the Detroit Lions, I think the main thing that people are going to wonder is Dan Campbell actually a good coach, or was he really propped up by his coordinators? That's going to dance around in people's heads. I think Lions fans are kind of sitting there. And if you watch this game, if you look how this game played out, if you look how they were unable to do some things, and I know the Lions, the O-line was a big question mark coming into the season. I think a lot of people may have underestimated the turnover they may have had. I know there's injuries, but the Lions O-line definitely hurt them. But the inability to adjust to that is, everybody's dealing with injuries. This is week 17. These guys are beating the crap out of each other all week. You're going to get banged up. Every team's banged up. At this point in the season, you don't get to say that. Unless the player's truly significant, like a quarterback, everybody's got injuries. But for this one, for the Lions, it's just like the offseason, you're going to have to really ask yourself, was Dan Campbell propped up by his coordinators? I think he's a good motivator of men. I think he gets, I don't want to put him in the Nick Sirianni bucket of like, hey, he can really motivate. He can hold people together. He knows how to have a good culture. People want to play hard for them. He talks about biting kneecaps, whatever Dan Campbell does. I think what's going to be really interesting is where do we go? Like he had to take over the offensive play calling duties. Ben Johnson, obviously we're going to get into the Bears game. Shout out Bears. We are a Bears podcast, bear down. And you look at what they're doing and how they've looked. And then you look at where the Lions have regressed over the course of this year. And it just, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking it. I was thinking it when I was watching this game on Christmas. I don't think a lot of people had this outcome in the realm of possibilities of that, the Lions are going to go beat the Vikings. The Vikings are starting Max Brosmer at quarterback. Like, listen, this is turnovers. This game was all turnovers. It was Jared Goff throwing a couple picks. He fumbled a couple times, and this is where you get. But that's just very uncharacteristic for a Dan Campbell coach team. You would think those are the things that they are like really dialed into. But you let the Minnesota Vikings pass for 51 yards, and you lose. You sack Max Brosmer 7 times, and you lose. I think the Minnesota rushing game, sure, but that's all they had. That's all they could do, because Max Brosmer wasn't going to do anything. It's the turnovers. You had Jared Goff had 3. He lost all three. Jahmyr Gibbs had one. He lost that one. And then you have Goff throwing another couple picks. These are just not things you normally see with a Dan Campbell coach team. And I think, not to take anything away from the Vikings, sure they played hard, but this is definitely about the Lions, and they need to have some inward reflection on what this season was, this coaching staff. What are we doing? What are we doing with this team? And they're going to have some moving pieces in the offseason as well, but I really think Dan Campbell needs to take a really hard look at his coordinators and what role he plays on this team, because this definitely wasn't it towards the end of the season. I think he identified it in the middle of the season, taking over the offensive play call duties. I think he understood, hey, there's something off here. And, just not what you normally would expect from a Dan Campbell coach team. So the Lions are eliminated. Lions aren't in the playoff picture. Not too many people had that on the bingo card. The next team we didn't think would not be in the playoffs was the Chiefs. And shout out to the Broncos. They clinched the AFC West for the first time since 2015. The Broncos, to wrap up our Christmas festivities, they held on. I don't think the Broncos are kind of the Broncos this year. I know everybody's going to talk about win percentage or opponent strength of schedule, all of that kind of stuff. When we talk about the Broncos, we talk about the Patriots. They have two of the easier schedules of the year, but, there's nothing they can do about it. You play the teams you can play. I think if you look at this game in particular and you look at the Broncos this season, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. I think if you're a Broncos fan and you're going into the playoffs, and I don't know if Charlie's listening. Charlie here with a leather brain, big Broncos fan. I know he was really stoked about the Broncos winning the AFC West. One of the things that you're going to have to do if you're a Broncos fan is just hang on tight, because during the regular season, the pressure's the pressure. You have the in-game stuff. You have the end-of-game comebacks. But when you talk about the playoffs, there is no tomorrow. Teams play a little differently. And if you're a Broncos team that is really, really, really used to, hanging on, having some things come their way, I talk about puck luck. If you're in hockey, if you're a hockey fan, you talk about puck luck. Like, where does it bounce? What happens? What are you getting? What are you not getting? This Broncos team's had a lot of puck luck this year, much like the Chiefs last year, where they won all these one-score games. So are the Broncos. But the Broncos are winning one-score games off of not a really, really, really tough strength of schedule. And we saw last week what happened with the Jags. I think if you're a Broncos fan, you just got to hang on tight. There could be a couple ways that this plays out. And I think for the Broncos, I could see them losing right away. I could see them, making it to the AFC title game, winning, maybe even being in the Super Bowl. The defense and special teams are good enough to put the Broncos into the Super Bowl. I think over the last few weeks, what you've seen with the Broncos defense, though, is that they're the opposing teams, whether it's the Jags, even this Chiefs team led by, a third string quarterback, they were able to score in the red zone. And I think for the Broncos, the beginning of the year, that nobody was scoring in the red zone against the Broncos. You got in the red zone, you just kick your field goal and you move on, because that's pretty much all you were ever gonna get. But the way this Broncos team is starting to mold, you see the defense kind of giving up some more scores, which puts some more pressure on the offense. And I think the offense can handle it. I think Bo Nix has shown that when he needs to show up, when he needs to hit Sutton, when he needs to hit Humphrey, when RJ Harvey needs to get some yards, they can do it. It's just, you don't want to have to always live like that. And in the playoffs, that gets dicey. You're going to be sweaty. So for Broncos fans, you're in. They clinch the AFC West. They can clinch the number 1 seed with just a win, but they got to win. And the Chargers are also fighting for seeding. The Chargers could get better seeding moving up. So this next week 18, that's one of the things to look out for. Is the Broncos can clinch the number 1 seed. You want that bye. It's not going to be easy. The Patriots also want it, but the Patriots, I think, who are the Patriots playing next week? Oh my God, it was nobody. Hang on. This is great radio. They get the Dolphins. That's right. They end the season with the Dolphins. So, could Quinn Ewers and the Dolphins beat the Patriots? Not likely. This will be in New England. They know what they're playing for. So for the Broncos, this becomes a must-win game next week. Now you never want to lose. Now you're in the part of the season for the Broncos, and now you can't lose. And They win the AFC West. This game was kind of a snoozer. I think that the Chiefs were up at halftime. With Chris Oladukin is the third string quarterback, kind of hanging on. And this also probably might have been Travis Kelce's last home game. The broadcast was definitely leaning into that. If you watch this game, they definitely kept showing him like he slipped them a note that said, "Hey, this is kind of it for me." Even though they were being very nice about it and being like, "Well, we don't know what's going to happen. He might retire. I don't know. He's getting married to Taylor Swift. They might have to go do a lot of stuff." I I got the sense that was it for Travis Kelce at Arrowhead Stadium. And the other news with Arrowhead Stadium is there's only like five more years of Arrowhead Stadium left. That I could do a whole other podcast on my feelings on that as a Chiefs fan. I think saying goodbye to Arrowhead like that's rough. I know the Chiefs are going to get a dome. It's going to be nice. Whatever. They all look the same now. That one sucked. I'm not a big fan of that. But this might have been Travis Kelce's last game. First ballot Hall of Famer. Say what you want. You may hate Taylor Swift. You may hate his antics. You may hate him as a person, but he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And, you guys can all suck it, I guess, because that's what it is. So, hey, guys, the Chiefs will not be in the playoffs this year. Playoffs are going to look really weird. I don't even know. I can't even put my finger on it. We'll talk about the playoff picture here at the end of this episode, but Broncos clinch. Broncos can clinch the 1 seed next week with a win. So we'll see. So there's a lot to play out in week 18. Another team that clinched, the Texans, take down the Chargers. This is actually what cemented the Broncos getting the AFC West. Was they needed the Chargers to lose another one to make it make it official, and they do. The Texans defense, man, this defense, I know the offense is figuring themselves out. I know they have CJ Stroud, but the Texans defense, if they make a run, and the defense has been key to this win streak that they've been on. This is going to be interesting. This is going to be really interesting coming down the stretch for the Texans. They win 20-16 over the Chargers. Like I said, locking in their playoff. Chargers are a good team. I think the Chargers are really solid. They're up and down. I just don't think anybody in the AFC is like a world beater. And that's not like, I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. They're just not. Like, you don't look at the AFC this year and you don't have a Tom Brady. You don't have a Mahomes. You don't have Joe Burrow. You have a Josh Allen, but Josh Allen's kind of playing with one arm tied behind his back with that offense. So there's just like not a lot of scary things happening in the AFC. But if you're the Texans, you're CJ Stroud, you're this team, you're like, man, this defense can take us pretty far because of the aforementioned lack of offensive firepower in the AFC. I think this really opens things up for the Texans to make some noise in the playoffs. They can make life miserable for some of these teams. And they did that this week with Justin Herbert. I think he completed a lot of passes, but they really just like bowed up when they needed to. They sacked him 5 times, A welcome result was CJ Stroud wasn't sacked this game, which if, you had me fill out, put a parlay together, that's not what I would have had down. Really, really interested in this Texans team as we get into the playoffs. This is a big win. For the Chargers, yeah, it sucked. You had an opportunity to win the division. They're in the playoffs though. A lot of things they can do, and they can right a few wrongs this week. They can get a little payback for the Broncos. They can knock them out of that 1 seed. Don't let them get that rest. And, there's a little something for them to play for there. But the Texans are really, really, really one to watch. And I know that a lot of talking heads will probably say this, if you turn on the 4-letter network or you're watching whoever the hell on Fox NFL, they're probably going to point to the Texans, and they're probably going to point to the Texans defense. Sorry, running a solo show and talking like this, I gotta take drinks. I'm drinking coffee because I'm also a little tired. So, Texans defense can take them far. We'll see what happens. I'm not really sold on the Chargers. I think they have some good pieces, some good weapons, but like, can you rely on Quentin Johnston in the playoffs? I don't know. I like Ladd McConkey. I like Omarion Hampton. I like what they can do running the ball. Their inability to run the ball this game was eye-opening, but again, that's the Texans defense. Like, they're going to take something away from you, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like in the postseason. What do the Texans take away from somebody? The last Saturday night game that we had, the Ravens stay alive over Green Bay. This was a little back and forth. Again, no Jordan Love. He was out with a concussion. I thought Malik Willis did some good things for Green Bay in this game. They were able to move the ball. They scored. It sputtered a little bit. It was Derrick Henry's show. it was the Derrick Henry show. I think he moved. Was it top 10 when he moved into 9 all time? I forget what it was. What was some career rushing mark? This is great planning. But he moved in the top 10 from rushing. But Derrick Henry runs for 216 yards and 4 touchdowns. Derrick Henry show. That's what it was. Green Bay tried. I think Christian Watson, he looks like he's coming in form. They got some good pieces. They need to get Jordan Love healthy. That's going to be the key to Green Bay. So this is one of those things where, like, Green Bay, I don't know if you've learned anything about yourselves. They're very much locked in to the playoffs as well. They want to get Jordan Love healthy, but Baltimore's fighting for their lives. They set up now a winner take all with the Steelers, and we'll get to the Steelers game in a second. They take a winner take all game with the Steelers next week, and Derrick Henry, this time. It's like there was a stat. If you're on Reddit at all, there was a thread. I know a guy every year he put together. It's like when Toyota-thon hits, when we get into the Toyota-thon part of the year, Derrick Henry yards per carry and touchdowns go like way up, and we're entering that time. It gets a little colder. People are a little tired of tackling. You just played your full season. Oh, well, here comes a Mack truck of a human being that can also run 1,000,000 miles per hour running at you. And, he doesn't give a shit. And he's just going to run it down your throat. And I think, Huntley didn't even really have to do anything for Baltimore in this. You think he threw for barely over 100 yards. He kept him on schedule. He only had 4 incompletions, which was what they wanted. Hey, let's make life easy. Let's take some shots. I think the longest completion was like 13 yards that they had all day. It was Derrick Henry. They just said, Green Bay, hello, how are you? We're going to run Derrick Henry down your throat for 4 quarters. We'll see what happens at the end of this. And we saw what happened at the end of this. The Ravens winning 41-24 over Green Bay. Excuse me. The next week, this I think Baltimore, I think they said, was it Baltimore Steelers now, or the Sunday Night Football game? That's going to be a hell of a game. Could be Aaron Rodgers' last game, maybe. Who freaking knows anymore? He might keep playing. I don't even know. He's married. He's not married. He's ayahuascaing. He's playing quarterback. But this sets a winner take all for the AFC North. This is the Tomlin Harbaugh special where they keep handing the division off to each other with like subpar teams, and they're going to do it again on Sunday Night Football. So they beat the Packers 41-24. Derrick Henry that was wild. If you didn't get a chance to watch that, if you didn't see any highlights of that, just imagine Derrick Henry running down the sideline. Just close your eyes and imagine Derrick Henry running down the sideline. There's your highlight reel for this game. Now, the thing that set up the winner take all for next week was the Browns beat the Steelers. I just, again, I think everybody has this gut feeling with the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers. You just don't trust it. You know what I mean? You just don't trust what you're seeing. You don't trust this team. They muster 6 points. Now, I know the Browns defense is really good. At any point in time, they're just going to choke you out. But this Pittsburgh offense, nothing looks great. Nothing looks great. I think Jaylen Warren's a nice piece, but the Browns win. Shedeur Sanders threw for 186, a touchdown. He did have a couple picks. I know there was a couple pictures of Deion Sanders very frustrated in the press box. I don't know. I like how everybody points to Deion and like it's your kid. You're watching your kid play football. I watch, I got a 12-year-old son that plays, basketball, and I see him do something stupid on the court, and I'm gonna be like, ugh. I probably have the same reaction. I think any parent that has a child playing any sport looks at that, or what Deion was watching Shedeur Sanders, and like, you can empathize with that. But Browns obviously not in the playoffs. But the Steelers, that's just not what you expect from a Mike Tomlin coach team. I firmly believe Tomlin's nearing the end. I wouldn't be surprised if this is it for him. I think I've been very adamant about that on this season of recording, of just like, I think this might be it for Tomlin. He might not have much more left in the tank. But now, winner take all, Sunday Night Football against Derrick Henry and the Ravens to see who actually goes to the playoff and gets that number 4 seed. They really got to redo that seeding. There's no way these two teams should be playing. The Ravens and the Steelers should be playing for the 4 seed, but that's how it goes. Division winners get that, the wild cards get the rest. So, that's what we're left with. And I don't know. Yeti comments, it's almost like the Browns win was scripted. I don't know about that. I just think that I don't know. I think the Cleveland defense is for real to the point where 40-some-year-old Aaron Rodgers and his band of misfit toys on the Steelers just couldn't put anything together. But that Sunday night football game will be a great end to the NFL regular season, and I know we'll talk about it next Monday. When we're on. I actually haven't told the guys I actually can't record next Monday, so we may have another solo show. I will actually be out of town, but it will be fun to watch that Sunday night football game with Steelers Ravens. Yeti asks, how would you redo the seeding? Combine the 14 best teams regardless of conference and seed by records. I think for your conference, the way I would do it, it should go by number one, your overall record, and then it should go by your record against teams in your conference. So if you got lucky and got the NFC division crossover, that is like, they're just completely shit teams, and that factored in, that shouldn't help your seeding comparative to the other teams. So I'm just taking AFC, for example. So if you redid them all 1 through 7, you take the 7 best, and then you group them that way. And then any tiebreakers or reordering you do by in-conference play. So very similar to what we do now. I just think they should shuffle it all up. Like if the AFC West has 2 teams with 11 wins or 12 wins, they should be up there. There's no way that the AFC North should be getting a team that also gets to host a home game. So I think redo it. I think obviously NFC, AFC, but then just split it, and then any tiebreaker is basically your AFC record, whatever your winning percentage is against the rest of the AFC teams. So we get to do that next week, next Sunday Night Football. I am really looking forward to that. I think the Week 18 is shaping up with some really interesting storylines. There's a lot of duds, and I'm not going to like overhype it, but there are some really interesting games next week. Next, I love Drake May. That's it. I don't know. Should we talk more about this game? The Patriots beat the Jets. The Jets were there. They participated in this game. I'm not sure what else they did. Drake May threw for 5 touchdowns. The Patriots scored 35 points by halftime. Now, I know people are going to bring up their strength of schedule. That's the first thing everybody's going to point to. If you bring up the Patriots, you bring up the Broncos, you're going to be like, their strength of schedule. Listen, they play who they have to play. All these teams play each other. They're all professionals. They're all in the NFL. They're all making an obscene amount of money to play this game that we all love to watch, and they win. And in this game, I know Brady Cook was starting at quarterback for the Jets. Shout out Missouri. Shout out Brady Cook. He wasn't going to do anything to these Patriots. The Patriots are also still fighting for that number 1 seed with the Broncos, so they very obviously want to win. The Broncos look like they are ramping, or the Patriots look like they are ramping, and the other teams in the AFC look like they're just kind of hanging on. They're just kind of holding on to whatever they have, and I think that's really scary. Patriots, they're back. It's like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. It's like they're back. We had Deflategate, we had Bill Belichick, we had Brady, we had all that. We thought we were done with the Patriots, but here they are. They are back. They won the AFC West. They took the 5-year streak away from the Bills. It's just what a year, what a shape of what a season in totality for the NFL to have like a changing of the guard already with like no warning. It was just like, okay, you're not going to get any Burrow. You're not going to get any, Jared Goff. You're not going to get any Mahomes. You're not going to get, Josh Allen's barely in the playoffs. He's, hanging on. Thankfully they won that game against the Ravens. Otherwise, they would kind of be there teetering as well. I think, it's just this is what it is. I don't know if this is just is this going to be the norm? Are the Patriots back to winning the AFC East year over year again? I don't know. It's interesting, but we just got a lot of new stuff thrown at us this year. But the Patriots beat the Jets. This was just an all-out slaughter. There's not even really anything to talk about or like digest other than the Patriots look like the number 1 seed in the AFC. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen. The Broncos have had a hell of a year too. So this is, if you're watching a couple games on Sunday, you're not really sure what to look at. You're like, why? I don't care about the Dolphins. The Patriots are already in the playoffs. It's, Patriots got to beat the Dolphins, and if the Broncos lose to the Chargers, the Patriots get the number 1 seed in the bye. The reverse happens, then the Broncos get the bye, and the Patriots are playing right away. So, yeah, Drake May, man, I don't know. It's just he's super. He comes from a really athletic family out of North Carolina. He seems to really be taking to this new staff, to what he's been given in front of him. The rushing offense looks incredible. They have a lot of pieces they can throw at you. I think Travion and Ramondre are very complimentary of each other. Obviously, Travion's the one that's going to give you the home run, but then Drake May he was 19 of 21. It's not like he threw 40, 50 passes and threw for 5 touchdowns. He threw 21 passes, and 5 of them were touchdowns. His QBR was damn near perfect. I know it's the Jets. I get it. But that's the end. I think for the Jets side, you kind of look into the offseason, like what happens with Breece Hall. I know that was a name that popped up a lot before the trade deadline. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Jets. They're going to have a top 5 pick. What do they want to do? Where do they go? Who freaking knows? They're just kind of in purgatory at the moment as a football franchise. But Patriots, if there's a fan base that deserves more winning because they've not seen any winning ever, it's probably the Patriots. They've never, I don't think the Patriots have actually ever won anything. I don't know. I'll have to Google this. I'm going to take a sip of coffee, and I'm going to quick Google, but I don't think the Patriots have ever actually won a Super Bowl. I don't know. Let me check. No, just kidding. They won a lot, but good for them. They're back in the saddle. Back in the saddle, baby. All right. Bucks spiraling. They lose 17-20 to Miami. Quinn Ewers started for the Dolphins. He threw for a couple touchdowns. Devon Achane rushed for about 83 yards. What is happening with the Bucks? I don't know. That's a tough pill to swallow, because they could have been, I think they would have been my dark horse kind of Super Bowl. They're just oddly spiraling at a very weird time. Baker Mayfield threw a couple picks, but he threw for 346 yards, a couple touchdowns. He threw it 44 times and threw a couple touchdowns. This still wild to me. Drake made 20 pass attempts, 5 touchdowns. Quinn Ewers had a good showing. I think Quinn Ewers needs some time. I don't know if this is the right system for him. I don't know if it's the right coaching staff for him, if I'm being quite honest. McDaniels, I've said very famously that he looks like a Planet Fitness, manager. Like he takes like the morning, like McDaniels looks like he opens the Planet Fitness, or he starts the day. Like he's folding towels when you walk in. That's what Mike McDaniels looks like, not an NFL football coach. I like my NFL head coaches to be fat. You're either really fat, or you're really in shape. You know what I mean? And he's not either of those. He's not like really in shape. And he's got to pick one. I think that's probably why I wouldn't, hire him, is because if Mike McDaniels came in, I'd be like, hey, do you eat or do you lift weights? And he would be like, no, but I can show you how to save money on a, 3-month subscription at Planet Fitness. And I wouldn't hire him. I just wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't hire him. But the Dolphins win. I've also had a like kind of a running joke bet that if the Dolphins went out, McDaniels would get to save his job. They lost last week, but I don't know if they beat the Patriots week 18, when the Patriots are actually playing for something and they finish the season 8-9, I still think there's an outside chance McDaniels keeps his job. I still think so. I know it sounds crazy. It's probably, the ship's already sailed. I just, in my heart of hearts, feel that way. Yet the Bucks have to figure out how to limit the turnovers. We talk about Goff having a few turnovers and that leading to the Lions' demise. This was Baker Mayfield's turn with the Bucks. He had 2 picks, 2 fumbles. That's hard to do. These games are razor thin. These games are very close. And if you give a team like that 4 extra opportunities to do something in the NFL, that's not going to be good for you. Not going to be good for you. So Tampa now, they fail to gain any ground in the division. They get the Panthers next, kind of for the division. That's it. They got to do it. They got to do it. They got to go out and they got to go figure out. They got to dig deep. This one hurts. To lose to Miami, That hurts. If you're a Bucs fan, you're looking at the Sunday slate of games, or if you're not sure, you're just like, oh, we play Miami. Okay, great. I'm going to go get some stuff done around the house. You didn't expect to tune in and be like, oh shit, we lost. We lost that one. Moving to the Bengals game. Joe Burrow's just really good at football. I don't know. This is the Bengals beat the Cardinals 37-14, and it happened. No playoff implications. Both these teams are eliminated, but Joe Burrow's good at football. He threw for 305 yards, a couple touchdowns. He needs to stay healthy. Looking forward, looking into next season, looking forward to what this Bengals team could be. I know it's not all his fault. I know there's a lot of issues with the defense. I know a lot of people have their qualms with Zach Taylor as a head coach. Joe Burrow's really good. We need to see it. That Super Bowl run they had is in the distant now. It's in the rearview mirror. That is far away. Very far away. So I just don't know. People are, I don't know. People are celebrating, kids are celebrating their 5th birthday, and they're like, I don't remember Joe Burrow being in the Super Bowl. Next year, that's what's going to happen. So Joe Burrow needs to figure it out. They need to figure out how they want to play. I know he's probably going to be extremely frustrated because he is so good at the game of football, and to be stuck on a team that is floundering and unsure of itself is kind of wild to me. You're just wasting a generational talent. I know we say that a lot, but I feel like Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, those were generational talents that you have, and you don't want to waste them because those are you get them every so often, and there's only a handful of teams that actually get to have those players. And so Joe Burrow's really good at football. Everybody else is decent at football. I'm excited to see what the Bengals can be next year, but that's kind of wrapping it up for their season. And for the Cardinals, I know Slaps isn't here to talk about how much he hates this coaching staff. I know he wants a complete turnover of the staff. I don't know. Maybe. I think there's some really interesting things. Jacoby Brissett threw for 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I think they have something here. I don't know. I like what the Cardinals can be. I get it though. If you're a fan, 3 wins isn't it? You're frustrated. Let's move on, and we're gonna move on too. Seattle beats Carolina. 1 seed is now in play for Seattle. I think they now go to the 49ers for a winner-take-all for the 1 seed in the NFC, just like we all predicted at the beginning of the season. We were all geniuses. We all were like, listen, this Seattle team and this 49er team are going to play for it all, and you guys just watch. And here we are. Darnold didn't have a great day. I think he's up and down, man. Up and down. The first half of that game last week with the Rams, you're like, well, here's Darnold. And then the second half, you're like, oh, shit. Okay, he's pretty good. And then this game, you're like, nope, that's what I expected to see. He threw for 147 yards, had a touchdown and a pick. Wasn't super efficient. This was really, Charbonnet's day as a running back. I think a couple touchdowns, keeping it on the ground. That's how Seattle's going to have to win, unfortunately, I think, in the playoffs, is they're going to have to hit some shots with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they're going to have to stay on the ground. I think they're going to have to do a lot of play action, and they do that a lot. That's a lot of what this offense is predicated on. They set up the pass with the run. They like to run. They like to play action off of that and hit some deep shots. And I think that's very much what they're going to have to do, because I just don't see Darnold doing it. Bryce Young threw for 54 yards. I wish Scotty was here, because he definitely the Bryce Young lights on theory is definitely one to watch. And if you haven't heard it before, we have this running theory that if Bryce Young is playing a game that is meaningful and he has to play well, he won't. If people are watching him play, he won't. It's like when you go to a gym and there's a guy shooting a basketball and nobody's watching him and he's just sinking everything. Just can't miss. This is beautiful. It's great. And then as soon as people start watching, it's like brick, air ball. And that's what Bryce Young is. That's the best encapsulation of what Bryce Young is as a football player. It's if nobody's watching him play, he can be pretty good. But as soon as people have expectations of him and the pressure's on, he throws for 54 yards. When your running back outgains you with only 59 yards rushing, your offense had themselves a hell of a day. Panthers drop. Seattle's now still in shape for the 1 seed. They have to go to the 49ers. So we'll see. We will see. But for Carolina, they have to take this 54 yards passing in Bryce Young, and they now have to go beat Tampa in Week 18 to win the NFC South. So we got a couple Week 18 clinching games. NFL has to love this. NFL's loving this. You got one seeds, you got one seeds in the battle. You got division winners tied up. We're trying to figure out what happens on Week 18. This is exactly what the NFL wants to do. NFL loves this. Finally, a Week 18 where nobody is just like, who gives a shit? If you got your Sunday ticket, that thing is, you got all 18 worth, baby. You got all 18, because this is going to be another week where you're going to be kind of tuning in and seeing what happens. Now, there's going to be a lot of shit being played, pardon my French, for Week 18. But again, there's a lot of meaningful games coming up in this Week 18 slate. The Jags beat the Colts. This one came down to the wire. I think the funniest part about this game is that Phillip Rivers and his arm are so old that they had to bring in, who the hell was it? They had to bring in Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard officially on the stat sheet is 0 for 1 with a pick, because at the end of the game, the Colts had an opportunity, kind of a Hail Mary. They lost 23-17, but they had a Hail Mary-esque way that they could have won this game by heaving it into the end zone, and the Colts had to bring in Riley Leonard to do it. That sucks. Because Phillip Rivers has his team watching, he's got people rooting for him, and he can't. I know I couldn't get there either. So whatever, he can point at me and laugh too. I know I'm behind a mic, but as a professional, as an athlete doing this his whole life, you're a quarterback of an NFL team, and to be told, hey man, the very last throw of the game, we're actually going to need you to sit down, and we're going to bring in this other guy, Riley Leonard, that we just, got our hands on, and he's going to come in ice cold, and he's going to heave it into the end zone for you. It's almost like when you have a stunt double. That's what that last drive felt like for the Colts, was that Phillip Rivers had a stunt double, and he came in to throw that last touchdown for him. It's like they should have at least let Riley Leonard put on a Phillip Rivers jersey just to give us the allure and the feel that Phillip Rivers was still doing this. But alas, the Jaguars win this one. Not a pretty game from Trevor Lawrence. I know if Slaps was here, he would also be I could probably give him like 5 to 10 minutes to just talk an enormous amount of crap on sunshine on Trevor Lawrence and how he thinks he sucks as an NFL quarterback. But the fact of the matter is, he is the quarterback of a 12-4 Jacksonville team, pretty snugly locked into that 3 seed. This team is what it is. The one thing I will say about this Jaguars team is in the way the staff is using him and how they look this year. They're using his legs. They're using him like they should be using him, where his arm is his arm. He can throw the ball, but his arm should almost be secondary. There was a couple plays where they ran with ETN where they did like the sprint option where they, kind of like got to the edge and had to make the end and corners make decisions. That's what this offense is, honestly. This isn't about just Trevor Lawrence's arm. You look at the stats, you do stat watching, you're like, oh, he didn't throw a touchdown, he threw a pick, but he rushed a couple touchdowns in. That is what they need to do. He's figuring out ways to score, and they're figuring out ways to utilize him that aren't just with his arm. And I think that is what Jacksonville needs to do in the playoffs. They need to figure out a way to put stress on the edges of this defense with ETN and with Trevor Lawrence. That's what they need to do. And they did at this game. Wasn't pretty, but Colts are still a tough team. Man, the Colts eliminated. You look at the beginning of the season, you're like, okay, the Colts, Daniel Jones, wow, this might be the best team ever. Daniel Jones, like, did he just pull the wool over our eyes and he goes down and the team sucks? And he was kind of spiraling towards the end of that. And then, obviously Daniel Jones goes out, and, as soon as Daniel Jones went out, Jonathan Taylor stopped being as productive. They had to bring Phillip Rivers out of coaching high school football to come in, and now they're out of the playoffs. There was I think they had like a 98% chance of making the playoffs at some point during the season, and they just did everything completely wrong. They also had a lot of luck, like bad luck, teams that started to get hot and win, and they just couldn't do it. So 8-8, that ends the Colts' playoff run. I think this last game, they should really give Riley Leonard a look. I know they brought Phillip Rivers in, but I think it's time to start looking at what else you have. Let's, start poking and prodding because we got to start looking ahead to next year. But with the Colts eliminated, back to the drawing board. Injuries suck. Injuries to your quarterback are the worst. That's a death sentence for any team. So they are eliminated. And the Jaguars moving on. Jaguars are, they're playing football. They're playing well. May not be the prettiest, but they're getting it done. The Saints and Titans played football on Sunday. They did. I looked it up for you. If any of you watch this game, you're lying. If anybody says you watch this game, if anybody listening to this says, yes, I tuned into the Saints Titans on Sunday, you are a freaking liar. I'm not even sure families or relatives of anybody playing for the Saints and Titans actually watch that game. I'm not even sure it was on TV. Did they actually play? I see scores and stats, but honestly, somebody could have gone in and just typed all that shit up and just been like, yeah, they played. Here's the stat lines. And I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's what they did. Saints beat the Titans 34-26 in a very meaningless, nothing game. But Tyler Shaw of the Saints, and I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I don't really care. But he threw for 333 yards and 2 touchdowns. We talked about this. I know Slaps and I kind of went back and forth. The Saints might have something at quarterback. They have options, kind of, potentially. Interestingly enough, I don't think beginning of the season, I don't think, many thought that the what they had at quarterback was going to be any good. But now the Saints are kind of left going towards the end of the season with like, okay, maybe we see what we have next year. Maybe we kind of put this together. That was a pretty big day. Olave had himself a day. It was just like guys popping up that you're like, oh yeah, I forgot you were playing. I do see videos of the game, so that did happen. They played. They did hit each other. But yeah, Saints win 34-26. Everybody's already eliminated. Congrats. That was a paycheck game. Show up, collect your paycheck. Thank you. Talk to your agents. We'll see you next year. Next game, the Giants. So the Giants won this game, but then they also lost. And if you're not familiar with what I'm about to say, like if you're into the weeds of this, I say this and you already know. The Giants beat the Raiders 34-10. Dart threw for over 200 yards. He had a couple rushing touchdowns. The game opened with a 95-yard kick return for a touchdown. So it's like everything Giants. You're like, woo, Giants won. The Giants actually played themselves out of the 1 seed, and now the Raiders are now the front runner for the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft because of this win. And so the Giants win, but this is like one of those things where the Giants fans are like, no, we didn't want to do this now. We wanted the Raiders to win. My dad and my uncle are Raiders and Giants fans, and they were texting each other, and they were just like, hey, should we get together and root for the other team? Like, I'll root for the Giants, you root for the Raiders, and we'll switch it up because nobody wants to win this. Now you're just fighting for draft position. But the Giants win 34-10, and they kind of lose their grip on the 1 seed. Now the Raiders got to lose again, and they got it. The Raiders got the number 1 seed. I know we'll talk extensively about what the draft looks like. I know a lot of people are going to point to Mendoza as being the number 1 overall pick, and he's the quarterback for the Indiana Hoosiers, who have the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. They get Alabama in Pasadena. If you get to watch him. So if you're an NFL, if all you do is watch the NFL, that's fine. I would encourage you to watch college as well. I'm a big college fan. I probably watch more college than I do NFL. I really love. I don't know. I love college football. Being a Husker fan, it's I'm a glutton for punishment. But tune into this game, Alabama, Indiana, New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl. You're going to see Mendoza, and this is either going to boost his number 1 overall stock, or it's going to plummet. And I'm not very sold on Mendoza. I know he won the Heisman, but I'm not very sold on him as an NFL prospect, if I'm being completely honest. I think any team that's rushing to the podium to draft him should think twice, maybe pray that they trip over their feet in doing so. Not sold on it. I know we'll talk about it extensively, but after this game, the Giants winning, the Raiders now have that ticket and can cash it in however they want. Ironically enough, Mendoza, I come from a Hispanic family. Mendoza being a Raiders quarterback, my family is all Raiders fans. That'd be kind of fitting. That'd be kind of fitting. Yeti, I don't know if you're still tuning in on the stream, but like that, something to think about there. But so if you're a Raiders fan, hey, you can win and lose and win at the same time, and that's what this game was. That's what this game ended up being. Another great game. I mean, not great if you like watching points being scored, because the Eagles beat the Bills 13-12. So like not obviously great for if you took the overs in this game. But the Eagles hang on and they beat Josh Allen and the Bills. Very low scoring. I think the Bills took until even the fourth quarter to get points on the board. The Eagles were just totally taking this offense apart and not letting them do anything. They got into the red zone. They went for it on fourth down earlier, and Josh Allen was denied at the one. It's just, man, this team, beginning of the season, I would have predicted this being like, this could be a potential Super Bowl preview. But I watched this game and I'm like, I don't know if these teams are good or not. I can't tell. And the Eagles win, and they probably should have put more on. They probably should have won more comfortably, but they did end up winning. If you didn't get a chance to watch this game at all, Josh Allen and the Bills score with basically no time left on the clock. They had scored earlier and missed the extra point. So when they scored this one, that's why it ended up 13-12. And instead of kicking the extra point, they went for two, which, if you can't trust your kicker to kick, that's what he does. It's still odd to me. You have you do one thing, you're supposed to do one thing really well. I know kicking stuff. I don't know. It's still mind-boggling to me. But they had to go. They went for two, ended up going for two. Josh Allen, he had Khalil Shakir running across the back of the end zone, and he was kind of fading to his left, and he kind of rushed the throw. It almost seemed like an anxious throw because he knew he had him, and he kind of let him just a little too much. And that's not very like Josh Allen to do, is to miss a ball like that. And they had it. The Bills had it. That sucks. You don't want to look at a game like this and, say anything too wild and crazy. But for Josh Allen, man, how many moments has he had like this in his career where, there's the opportunity in front of him to make a play, and for some reason he just doesn't. He makes all these miraculous plays. He's one of the best quarterbacks. He's a reigning MVP. He's a tank. He's got a cannon. But for some reason, just in these moments, it's just just a little off. And that's what happened. That's what the Eagles hang on and win. Like I said, it was a fun game to watch at the very end. If you watch the rest of the game, probably you can fast forward it if you TiVoed it, if you plan on watching it. Spoiler alerts, my bad. But Josh Allen misses a late throw. Bills end up going down. The sideline looked gutted. Yeah. And because Shakir was wide open too, I think they all saw the play call was right, man. That was right. Everything was set up right. Shakir had a little shake route, broke it off left, going towards, the corner of the end zone, along the back of the end zone. He was it was there. It was there. Josh Allen just let him a little too much. And that's football. As far as playoff implications, it's more seeding than anything. Eagles are going to be in, the Bills are in, just kind of like who they play. There's a scenario here where the Bills play the Patriots right away in the playoffs, and man, wouldn't that suck? Wouldn't that suck? Oh, that would just suck. You hate playing a divisional opponent right away. You'd like to mix it up before you eventually get to your divisional opponents. But Eagles hung on and won. There's not really a ton to say about this. I'm still very perplexed by the Eagles offense because the Bills defense isn't that great. Bills defense has a lot of pieces banged up, and Jalen Hurts couldn't really throw it. Saquon couldn't really run it. They just kind of, I don't know, just kind of was. I think the underlying thing here is with Brandon Cooks catching 4 balls for 101 yards. You kind of do a double take at that stat line. But if you're a Bills fan, shit happens. You were right there. Again, puck luck. Things happened during that game that you probably wouldn't expect to have happen again. But that could have been the final game for Josh Allen and the Bills at that stadium. They open up the new stadium and just kind of a bad taste in your mouth. You're kind of celebrating. You hope maybe there's a playoff game in there, but they're not. If they host, there's going to have to be some craziness that happens above them to allow that to happen at this point. So that's where we end off on that one. Game of the year candidate. We were texting about this in the Leather Brains chat. The 49ers beat the Bears. This game got spicy. I said the Bears had to score late to to kind of dethrone the games of the year. I think the Seahawks and Rams game last week was really good. I still like the Ravens and Bills game at the beginning of the year, even though we know both of those teams kind of are what they are now. They're probably not as great as they were, but I just thought that game was super entertaining from beginning to end. You're just like on the edge of your seat. And this game had all of that too. This game was really back and forth. I was getting a lot of texts even during this, like from different groups, just like, oh my God, this game's amazing. Oh my God, this game's amazing. And I think even though the Bears lost, this is still super, super encouraging that you were in a game like this on the road and you had a chance to win. Like, you were in a game. Shit happens in games. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. But I think for the Bears, this is one of those things where Caleb Williams throwing for 330 yards, throws a couple touchdowns. I'll get to some of the things I'm going to nitpick about Caleb Williams here in just a second. But he had a decent day. Running the ball, they were okay. I would have liked a little bit more production, but they were okay. And then Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy threw 3 touchdowns. He threw that early pick 6. McCaffrey's just a beast. The Niners are a wagon. I was happy to see Ricky Pearsall as well. See him flash on the screen as well. Just a lot of really good playmakers for the 49ers team. But if you didn't watch this game, shame on you. End of this game was amazing. The Niners, it was back and forth. There's just scoring. Complete opposite of the Bills-Eagles game where there was no scoring. It was like a church. It was just, we're here. The Bears and Niners was just points all over the place. And the Niners go and score late. And then the Bears have the opportunity to go and score to win the game. Now they had to get a touchdown, obviously. If you can look at the score and you do the math and you understand how scoring works in the NFL, the Bears had to throw a touchdown. They were there. There was a ball in the end zone. Caleb Williams got pressured late. But Caleb Williams missed some passes. There was some drop balls by this Bears team that they gotta clean up, because earlier in this game-winning drive, Caleb Williams had a pass that if he completes it, I think they score and win. I think he runs into the end zone, and Caleb Williams, for whatever reason, he's floating backwards, flat-footed on his heels, and just kind of like skipped the ball in front of him. And it's like, come on, man. That's what you need. So as a Bears fan for this year, as a Bears podcast for this year, that is like one area as you go into the playoffs that you would really, 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 really love to see that cleanup. I know everybody saw it. The broadcast saw it. They were commenting on it. Ben Johnson's probably trying to coach that out of them, but those are easy plays. Yes, it's chaos. It's the NFL. Relatively, those were easy plays to make. Colston Loveland as well as the tight end for the Bears. He had a drop too, and I don't think he'd had a drop all year long, but he looked good. Luther Burden, so I was a little scared. I know MK. I don't know if MK is watching. I know he's busy. We're all busy this time of year, but Luther Burden, this was his coming out party. 138 yards receiving. He had a touchdown. He had 9 targets. He definitely looked the part of like what everybody else was thinking when he came out of college, was that this guy could be a weapon. He could be a guy that really separates himself and can be, the number one target for the Bears, if things shake out the way it was. And he had himself a hell of a day. And at the very end, the very last play, he gets hurt. And I thought he blew out his knee. I was texting. I was like, oh God, did he just blow out his knee? Ends up, as Google will show you, if you just do some quick researching, just seems like a quad injury. The Bears organization doesn't think it's that serious for Luther Burden moving forward, which is really good. Chicago Sun-Times had quoted Luther Burden. He said he was just tired, which, he had himself a hell of a day. And that drive was very anxious, and you get pretty gassed. So, 49ers though, man, now they set up they got the next game. They set up a Saturday game with the Seahawks. They host the Seahawks for the number 1 seed. You win, you rest. Those are always fun things to play for, especially if you're a team like the 49ers that struggled with injuries, putting tape and glue on certain players and pieces of this offense and defense to try to get them to the finish line. And that rest is super important. Super, super important. The Bears clinching the NFC North, this very much looked like a playoff game. This looked like a game that you wanted to see in the playoffs, where you're like, holy shit, these teams are great. I love this. And I hope this is what we're going to get out of these two teams when we actually march into the playoffs and they play some of these games. But Caleb Williams, they gotta shore those up, because those in the flat routes, those you're getting pressure from the edge. If you know football, not that I'm trying to mansplain anything to anybody listening to this episode or watching this, is that in football, the quarterback is diagnosing what is happening at the line of scrimmage, and he has a few seconds to do it, right? It's processing. Everything's really fast. You're reading the safeties, you're looking at the coverage, you're kind of adjusting your protection, you're sliding, you have checks, you audibles that you can get in and out of that allow you to put your offense in the best position to win. And Caleb Williams was doing a lot of that, whether that was in the huddle at him at the line of scrimmage, I don't really know, but Caleb Williams was getting to the line of scrimmage and they were in the right call, right? And 49ers were bringing pressure off the edge. And he had these flat routes, these out routes right in the flat that Caleb Williams can hit, which are purely designed for, if I have pressure, you throw it to where that pressure came from. That's like one of the things that, you listen to NFL coaches, they'll talk about, or quarterbacks. You look where the pressure is coming from and you want to make sure you get something in behind that, something quick, especially if your line's going to be outmatched. And that's what happened a handful of times in this game where he was getting the pressure. He knew where the pressure was coming from. The route was right where it should be, and he just couldn't deliver the ball. And those are the things that, like, as the Bears in the playoffs, that I would love to see them clean up, because if you can do those little simple things, sure, they can have the big plays with Colson Loveland, Burden, Swift. They can do a lot of things. Manungai is, I think, unsung hero of this offense as well. Like, the offense can do some things that are very portable, but those things they got to clean up. You did 90% of the work. Now you just got to throw the ball to them. You diagnosed it. You have the route right. You understand what's coming in front of you. I'd love to see them clean that up. But the 49ers win this one. Really excited. Like I said, the weekend's got some really exciting gems. And so this sets up 49ers Seahawks for the 1 seed in San Francisco or Santa Clara, if you want to get super specific. But yeah, that's where we are. Okay, so that wraps up the week 17 slate. I know we got a Monday Night Football game tonight. We got Rams Falcons. I truthfully think, and I know a lot of the Leather Brains community thinks, that Rams might be the Super Bowl favorite. Devontae Adams isn't going to play. Smart. I mean, they're not kind of playing. I don't even think the Rams are playing for seeding. I think they're locked in. You want to win this game. The division is still the division is not in their hands anymore. Rest Devontae. I think you just don't want to show too much if you're the Rams in this one. I think they should easily get this done. These are things that you want to get this part of the season. You just want to be, like, very technically sound if you're an offense. Expect them to do that tonight. Expect them to run the ball quite a bit. Expect them to hit some underneath stuff. They don't want to get Stafford killed. No need. You just kind of want to control the ball. And so tonight, I think that's what you're going to get. I think you're going to get the Rams. I think it'd be flashy wrong. It could be super flashy. So I'm going to say both things. But and if I were betting, I would say it's going to be really close to the vest. I would say the Rams want to take the air out of the football and move on to the next week. One of the segments that we do on Leather Brains is we have our Pab-ass bitch of the week. Sorry if you have kids listening or the kids are in earshot. I said it. My bad. We'll just say Pab of the week. So our Pab of the week just goes to, we select somebody that we're just like, come on, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? Like, why? Who is this person? Like, why are we doing this one? My Pab of the week, unfortunately, is going to have to be Jared Goff. I know we talked about it earlier. I'm just, in a game you got to have, and some of the throws that he was making, some of the decisions he was making, I just don't get it. You never want to put a loss on one person, because it never is, but that was very much on Jared Goff, in my opinion. That's way too many turnovers for one human being to have in a game and expect to have a chance to win. Like I said, the Vikings threw for 50 yards and you lose, and that's what you end up with. So my Pab of the week, Jared Goff. I don't want to keep going in and on him. Sorry about that. If you're a Lions fan, but that's our episode. If you tuned in, appreciate it. If you're still here, appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, you want to banter with us and the guys, make sure you're logging into X, Instagram. We're on YouTube. MK, Charlie, and the guys still pumping out content. We got a lot to interact with, a lot of thought pieces. We love talking to all you guys. I love talking to all you guys. I appreciate you tuning in, chiming in, leaving comments. Appreciate the love. We love doing this. Again, week 17. We only got one more week left of this. So man, this season does go by fast, and then we get into the playoffs. So we still got football left. Not going to get too sad, but we still have some football left. But I appreciate you. Make sure you follow us on the socials, like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Appreciate you. Helps pay the bills. Appreciate you all for tuning in once again. Happy holidays again. Merry Christmas again. And as we say on the Leather Brains, hold on. I got to set the video. Oh, it won't let me set the video. So this stream, the stream's just going to abruptly end. But I appreciate you guys. Much love. Have a very safe and happy new year. We are out.